time to be here on Saturday. Who here has been potted before?
What?
Yeah. Is it successful?
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully by the end of this kind of like little demonstration, you'll have a little bit of more insight on how to do it, being successful with it. It's not as scary as you might think.
Yeah.
The act itself is actually rather simple, so I'm stretching this over an hour. I may not give you that whole time, but I'll also be here afterwards for any questions. But like I was saying, like the act itself is really easy. And once you do it a couple times, it's really just kind of getting the tools together. You have to do some research first on your plant, depending on if it likes to be in a pot, and obviously like the type of pot it is and the soil as well. I've got a couple plants on the repot. I don't typically pot right into the ceramic or the plastic or the terracotta. I like to repot the inside of the nursery pot. You can usually find them in the retail nurseries or online to get a ton for that cheap. The reason I like doing that is because when it comes time to repot again, it's less of a hassle. Also, you can just kind of play with the plants. I don't know about you. My plants at home are a hobby of mine. They're not always in the same spot as they should be. But to have them in a grow pot, you just pop in, on whatever your aesthetic changes sometimes, or you just like the pot that you see at a nursery, you can try it. So that's why I do that. A little bit about me. I've been in this industry for 9 years almost. It's my third year here as the manager buyer. So I'm kind of responsible for all the plants you see that are at least on the inside, and then at springtime I have the tropicals that we deal with outside. But I bartended for a long time, and then when I had kids, it really wasn't too conducive. Lifestyle at 8 hours, so I took a summer job merchandising flowers for Bell Nursery, and it kind of, I don't know, it stuck with me. The interior plants, all the tropicals, I just fell in love with them. The annuals and stuff, I can make them pretty outside, but I spent most of my time inside, taking care of the plants. So I started kind of taking them home, and before you know it, it was an addiction. I have way too many, but it's a healthy habit to have, and it's really hard. I've loved nature since I was a kid, and this is a way of bringing that kind of inside. As a kid, I had posters of rainforests and things like that on my wall. Now I actually literally have a rainforest on my wall. That's screaming everywhere now for some more. But that being said, I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations, and feel free, by the way, throughout this to type in and ask any questions that you want. So we have a couple plants here. We have Syngonium, a silver sword, a crusty ZZ, and a Philodendron monstera, split leaf. You see these super popular. Even this, it's like on patterns, on walls, on pillows, on you name it. But and there's a reason for that. It's pretty sturdy plant. A few things to consider before you actually kind of get started. Like I was saying earlier, you want to get some research done on the plant that you're actually working with. That way you can get the necessary tools for it, because you may need a different soil for this type of plant versus this type of plant. But realistically, all of these things, it's the same that we're putting in, but it's just depending on what plant it is, what kind of you need. But what you'll always need is something sharp that cuts, gloves if you want to get hurt your nails. Plant, we're going to be repotting, obviously. So this is actually, this is a nursery pot that we got in that we find when we buy it in the nursery. This is the next size up. So in choosing the pot size, it's really crucial you only go up about 1 inch to 3 inches, wider than the diameter of the root wall. Simple reason is that it's just too much soil. If it has too much soil and the soil to roots ratio is off, it's going to keep that wet too long. That meaning your roots. And that's when you the back. It'll end up deteriorating your roots. And you may notice a lot of bad smell to it. It's rotting vegetation. So it's important that the roots have room to grow and not too much room to grow, because that's that ratio is off. And overwatering is really the number one issue I find with customers who come in and ask what's wrong with my plant. I get it, you kind of want to nurture it, but a little neglect goes a long way. Some plants in particular, like the ZZ, just forget it. It lasts a little while without water. And that's because certain plants have more robust leaves or stems, or even down the root system. Some of the roots can be a little more chunky. Those are signs of a plant that can hold moisture above the soil. So they don't necessarily rely on the soil, on the dampness of the soil to keep it healthy. It's all right here. So giving it too much water, this isn't just easy. Usually I think full plants that kind of respond the same way. Too much water will end up killing them. You'll notice it will be yellow, droopy, it'll just look sad. Tools. Getting started, just like a chef would before he cooks. You want to have all the ingredients, all your tools, things necessary, knives, skillets, what have you. You want the same kind of deal with repotting. So there's some things I'm working on behind here that you can't see. I've got my soil, and I've got a couple of empty bins. Ideally, maybe you want to do this outside, depending on the size of the plant. Something like a day like today would be perfect to go outside, put down a tarp, or if you have lucky enough to have a kitchen space, something like that. You are going to make a mess. That being said, as you inside, be aware of that. So have something down to collect all the loose soil, and you know that you're getting essentially mud in your house. A good shovel. So we got a shovel, a couple of bins. You've got some to cut with, and gloves. And Syngonium. Beautiful, beautiful house plant. Not a super fast grower, but under the right conditions, it'll grow quickly. Some things to look for when it's time to repot. I should back up a little bit. You don't have to repot as soon as you get a plant. You don't. It's probably, it is. It's detrimental to the plant because these are living things. And just like any living thing, if you pluck it from its home and you put it somewhere else, it's probably not going to like that too much. So you have to give the plant adequate time to adjust to your environment for your house. Everything's going to be different. The humidity, light, a lot of variables go into that. So the best thing to do is to kind of put it where it's going to be in your house and let it acclimate to that. It will. It might show you some signs of stress, whether it's drooping leaves or dropping leaves, like a ficus leaf fig will do that to you in a heartbeat. But you just got to learn to not fret, and then it'll get used to your house, and it will come back in just a couple of weeks. But that being said, you don't have to repot right away. A lot of plants can stay in a nursery pot if you buy it for a good while. I've had some of them for over a year, 2 years sometimes. But it'll start showing signs of needing it, and you have to know what to look for. So first thing is look at the drainage holes at the bottom. If you see roots coming out with drainage holes, and I don't see too many here. But that's a number one indicator. Another one is it's just not growing very fast. Even in growing season, you notice the plant just doesn't look like it's getting any bigger. Probably because it's deep down. Another sign is that it's top heavy. Like monstera here, these get unrooted pretty quickly. And when that weight is up here and it's have some kind of solid down onto it, it'll just topple it over. So if you have signs, you can inspect them. Usually they pop out pretty carefully. Yes, go ahead.
Does what you're saying apply to plants like orchids? Or
what are you asking about?
Orchids?
Does what I say apply to orchids?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now, just like with these different plants. Orchids have their own requirements as far as soil goes. But yeah, essentially it's the same principle. Yeah. Yeah, and even more so like Monstera and the orchids, the aerial roots are okay. They don't mind being a little compact. That being said, there's a difference between being a little compact and not being able to breathe. Yeah. So when you take it out and you look at it, you'll notice that all these roots have kind of formed into the pot it's in. And it's kind of stopped. There's nowhere to go. So if you have your next size pot, ready to go next to it, and you have, let's do this, it's a lot easier than front. So you get the next pot started up, and really what you want to do is kind of fill the bottom. Now make sure you have some drainage holes. That is essential. You can keep a plant alive in a pot without drainage holes. In fact, people do it for a long time. Europeans were a little ahead of us in that, and a lot of their pots have holes in them. We're sort of kind of catching up. But if you have a pot that doesn't have drainage holes, your margin of error really decreases because you have to know what you're doing with the water. You know, it's really easy to overdo it. With the holes, you know, the plant will let go when it doesn't need, and reabsorb, you know, what it didn't get the first time. So 100% recommend drainage holes. A lot of ceramics, especially really pretty ones, don't have drainage holes. Another reason why I use diversity pots is you can take it out, get used to the weight. When it's really full and quenched first. But you can also just put it in your sink, depending on the size of the plant, obviously, but you can just put it in your sink or outside and let it drain, as opposed to, you know, not know if you can get a moisture meter, but you know that plant's drying out between waterings if it has adequate drainage. So you want to take your next pot size and the Syngonium, you know, they like to dry out between waterings just a little bit, but not too much. So we're not using super aerated soil. Sperma potting is just fine with this. So what you're going to do is fill it up to, I don't know, it's about 2 inches on the bottom, 3 inches. You're going to probably have to play with it a little bit just to get the height right. So we look at this root ball. Now you don't want to just mass it, but what you want to look for are many roots that are just really kind of squishy or soft to touch or just fall out. And if that happens, it's fine. But you want to get rid of that dead material. So what you want to do is massage the root ball, but at the same time you don't want to like just tear it to shreds. You want to keep some of these, especially these main roots, intact. So over the course of my years, you can probably imagine I've done this a lot. But actually, really don't have to allow all to do. And I don't do it nearly as much as I should at home.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
I never got like sure.
Yeah, well, like I was saying, like for the most part, when you take a plant home, it's good in that nursery pot for a good while. It's got the nutrients it needs in it. You know, it's coming from a place that took care of it. It's got everything it needs. You know, rarely do I get things that come in really root bound. Sometimes spider plants will do that, or monstera, really overachieving plants. But for the most part, the standard plants that we get in here don't grow so fast and naturally. You know, like I said, it's really just half the battle is knowing when to do it, and then gathering up the materials to do it. And once you kind of get started, it's really easy. Because I have probably about 120 houseplants in my and half of which are about 6-inch pots that need to go in an 8-inch pot. I do it for a living. So, but that's a testament to how kind of more robust you might think the plants are. And I get the apprehension to do it because you pay money for it, you like it. You know, it's a beautiful thing, it's a living thing. You hate to do something that's going to hurt it or potentially kill it. But once you get over that kind of hump of not wanting to face it and do it, and you do it successfully, it makes it something you just start doing it. you realize how simple it is. So now that I've massaged this root ball enough, so if you have really dangly ones, you can trim them just for fitting in the pot better. But you also want to have some sort of a bind up here. Not every plant's going to be the same with how you take it out of the pot, but for the most part, they should be held together. And so you don't want to take it completely out. There's videos out there I see of people washing them down. You're getting them almost completely naked, bare hair to the roots. You can do that, but I've always looked at this and I've never actually done it. So it makes it a little easier on yourself. So now that you've got the soil off, you kind of play with the height of the pot a little bit. So I've already got soil in here. And what you want to do is kind of, you want the top of the plant, the root ball to be a little lower than the lip of the plant. And that looks to be pretty good height-wise. So now we've added a couple inches underneath the roots, they have somewhere to go. But we need to give them so much room that they're going to be drowned. So you look at the pot, it's got an inch and a half, 2 inches of growth there to do, which is perfect. Because it matches that size, it matches the speed of the plant as well. Take our soil and backfill all the way around.
Can you reuse the soil that you took off of the
No,
plant?
because
No.
when it comes time to repot, this is all going to be devoid of anything good for your plant. All the nutrients, slow release fertilizer, all that comes in that medium when you buy the plant is no longer there.
Okay.
And typically that runs out every 1 to 2 years when the plant is ready to grow. Some plants grow quite a bit faster, so it's really just it's plant dependent and also the environment. Some plants that are low light use this because they prefer light, indirect light, but they can tolerate that lower light. That lower light will cause it to grow a lot slower. Something like it's easy here, if you have it somewhere pretty far from the window, you're not looking at a lot of growth. You might see a little bit. The more indirect light you get, and if you have the right conditions in your pot, then it should be growing just fine. So reach points over there. So this fresh soil will have all of the things it needs. Just basically giving it a breath of fresh air. But more importantly, it's giving it room to grow and continue living. So you cast the pot, let all that soil kind of fall down in between all those roots down there. You never want to really kind of be too forceful. Plants are a little more resilient than I give credit for. You can be a little firm with them, and that's something you kind of learn over time. When I'm merchandising plants, I'm doing it pretty quickly. And really forceful, they're fine. But that being said, you don't want to force the roots into something that you want to let them naturally lay where you help them. And so this kind of just helps facilitate that. All that soil, that loose soil, will kind of find its way down where it needs to be, down at the bottom. So you tap it a couple of times, you'll see the level go down. And you just keep backfilling until it makes sense. I mean, you'll see it kind of just below the lip of the plant. If your soil exceeds that, it goes above the lip, when you water it, it's just going to cascade over and make a mess. So you want to have some sort of reservoir, whether it be this, it doesn't have to be too deep. And now you can start lightly, kind of like tapping it down. Still tapping the whole time. Every time you do that, it's helping kind of just solidify that soil block. Now we've successfully gone from a 6-inch pot to, there we go. This is an 8-inch pot, 1 gallon pot maybe. And this is why I hold on to every nursery pot I ever buy. Sometimes these are hard to find, and not everyone is the same. A 10-inch pot from here, you get a 12-inch from here, and your plant doesn't necessarily jump to 2s all the time. It goes from 10 to 12. So it's fun to have those, or it's kind of perfect to have those in between sizes. And the only way you get that is kind of like hoarding. So that's in there, and you wouldn't put this on your table, but we'll put something like this. So to the naked eye, it looks like it's hot in there. And now you can just take it out easily, water it, let it drain. Once it's done, you put it back. Now this spot actually does have a drainage hole, but I still recommend just thoroughly watering it outside the pot. You'll have to play with the pot a little bit, so I just got lucky that this kind of fit in here pretty nicely, but if it was too tall, we couldn't use the pot. A lot of times it'll come a little shorter, but we'll just use anything, really. Anything to kind of prop it up, even a matchbook or something, just to kind of prop it up an inch. I should mention that you should water your plant 2 days before you do it. Repotting a saturated plant is not fun. However, doing it dry adds a little more stress added to the situation. So they can tolerate that repotting a little bit if they're just like 2 days out from being water. So kind of plan ahead of us. Because I've done it wet, and it's just falling apart. It's not easy. Any questions so far? Okay? All right. For you houseplant owners, this is a plant that I really recommend. Azizi. Try pronouncing its Latin name. I can't. But this is a tried and true plant, and it's a staple for many reasons. But the main reason is because it's really easy to remember. It's easy to use. They have nice, thick, waxy leaves. They shine up really nice. They don't take up a lot of room. They're not slow growers, and they're good for rooms that don't have super bright light. That's why you see a lot in offices and malls and things like that. They're easy to take care of. ZZ is one of those plants that really appreciates a small pot size. You'll see when I take it out of this pot in a second that they have a really robust root system. They're thorns, what we call them. It's almost like a root ball, essentially. And they don't mind it. They like to be really tight. Sometimes you'll find that the pot size, the pots it gets in, is all bent out of shape. And that's still okay. You'll see the plants thriving because it's like stuck in there. So that being said, sometimes you don't go up pot size. You keep the same pot size, but maybe just ever so slightly bigger. But the main point there is just to give it some fresh soil, fresh nutrients. So after a year or two, you want to do that. Again, find your pot. Make sure it's about an inch bigger if you're working with a ZZ. You really just want ever so slightly more room for it to grow. Take it out of its pot. You'll see that these have really tight and really firm roots. One of the reasons this plant is so hardy is because the roots retain moisture. These are nice, thick, hardy. These retain moisture in the leaves as well. Anytime you see a thick, waxy leaf like that, it's probably drought tolerant. So you may have to work a little harder with these, just because they are a little more tough. Now, because this plant is drought tolerant and it likes to stay dry for the most part, that's going to dictate your soil. We're going to make cactus succulent soil. It's soil that just is a lot more aerated, and it allows the plant to it brings away the moisture a lot quicker than standard potting mix would do. For the ZZ, I'm kind of doing the same thing. You'll notice that this process is really the same for every plant. You kind of just massage the root ball. Just get all that kind of nutrient-deficient soil out of there. And with a ZZ, the CDs here, Everybody good to look? These are corms. And what I like to do before I repot them usually is kind of score it. Even a fork will work, but these are kind of like fleshy, so you can sort of, you don't want to massacre it, but if you just kind of strike it a little bit, it encourages new growth. It'll kind of, well, I don't know the science behind it, but it works. So you'll see every time, every plant that's in here, you'll have a good form, like a good root ball. And you don't want to overdo it, but if you score it, I've heard and I've seen that it encourages new growth. So probably thinking maybe, when do I fertilize? When you repot a houseplant, you don't want to fertilize right away. So there's a couple of stages, I guess, essentially. Let the plant acclimate to your environment. Once you see that it's doing okay there, then you repot. And then you can wait a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to fertilize. Once that's shown that's doing fine. Let it recover from being repotted. Because some plants, even just moving them across the room, they show you that they're not happy. And that being said, of course, when you put it apart, it's not happy either. So you want to give it time.
Would you divide it if you want to give it more, would you divide it based on where the corms are?
Yes, yep, yes, you will. And this is easily propagatable too. Like, this will survive in the water. I have a lot of cuttings in my house. You know, a little drop of fertilizer, and they just sit in flat. It's kind of that's the it goes on for it, it stays alive that way. We check to change the water out because that water, that oxygen evaporates, and eventually, you know, so once a week, I guess I replenish the water. It's kind of a fun way to display your plants, and where you don't feel like So yeah, to answer your question, yes, you would split it kind of naturally where you see the forms there. So now I've got all this soil out. Again, I've got my new pot. So the cactus soil is really good for obviously cactus and succulents, but it can be used as an additive to other soils to help it aerate. Also perlite, you know, a little bit of this helps as well to help those plants naturally dry out. I even use orchid mix or active violet mix. It's just a kind of a chunky bark that helps keep that soil from staying too wet for too long. So all the things, and every plant's going to have a different ratio for that. So off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. It depends on the plant. And so one thing you want to do too after you repot it is to water. That water will also carry the soil down to where it needs to be, without it being too, forceful in there. Again, kind of lightly pushing, but not forcefully pushing the plant down. It will kind of find its way. Just have to be patient. This spot has no drainage in it, but because I put it in here, I can take it out and water it at my leisure and not have to worry about, how wet is it. I guarantee you this plant would not do well in here if I had just planted it right in this pot. So again, another reason why I always just kind of use nursery pots. They're a lot easier to work with. I've had pothos that was in a big, I potted right into a big old pot like this, and I had to crack the top because it just wasn't coming out, and you don't want to rip it out. But sometimes when they have kind of overachieving roots like these, they will just adhere themselves to the inside of that pot. You can't get rid of it. And this allows you to see when it's time to repot as well. That pothos, it was time probably 2 years past. Because when it came out, the roots were the exact same shape as the top. And I would have known that well in advance had it been in some years. So, again, you just put it in your aesthetically pleasing pot, and there you go. It's easy. Now, those are relatively easy plants. I've got a brush. But, some will give you a little bit of a fit. And obviously, the bigger the pot or the bigger the plant, the harder it's going to be. And some of them require 2 people. So this one is getting a little leggy of silver sword. And I've kind of just band-aided it while it's been here on the retail floor. But eventually it's just going to look bad. It's going to get leggy, look bad. So, there's 2 ways to go about it. You can either continue for a plant like this that likes to grow, to climb. You can either continue letting it do that by introducing a pole, a moss pole, or even the plant's not that big, you can use like a skewer. So this is kind of how I've been holding it together. And then just using like a clamp like that. But eventually the plant's just going to get too leggy for this pot. So look at the pot, it's a good size for it. About an inch bigger than what it needs to be. So when pulling it out of the pot, you don't want to rip it. You just kind of want to, the plant will come out. If you massage the pot a little bit. It doesn't take much of it. Some might take a little more effort just because if it's more root down than it should be, it'll get through the fight, but it should come out rather easy if you just kind of give it a couple of squeezes. So this one has kind of thin, spindly roots. So we have to be gentle with them, keep them intact. At the same time, getting rid of that nutrient deficient soil. This one's also easily propagatable. Snip it underneath these nodes here. Put that under soil. You should have a new plant. Or in the water, like I was saying. So that sounds good. That's enough soil. Again, you see some people kind of rinse them down. In my experience, I've never had issues with not doing that. It's soil, whether it's nutrient filled or not. So, if you wanted to, you could encourage this to grow out and more full by cutting these and having these nodes put in the soil and having it kind of grow like a basket in a way. That is a little more time consuming. So for today's sakes, I'm just going to staple, put it in staple. Sometimes they come in these little plugs, they call them death plugs. I don't know if you've got a smaller plant before, they have this kind of like mesh cloth in it. Those are not bad for the plant. It may look like it's inhibiting it from growing, but if there's roots coming out through that thing, they're fine. They're doing fine. That being said, you can pull it out. If it's not going to rip it apart. All right. So we put the soil in the bottom. A half inch down from the lip.
What is that?
So I'm going to have to open one. I thought I had one of these open. So this is a cocoa coir moss bowl, and this holds moisture for the plant. It will like that. Also, it's kind of a natural adhesive for the plant. So these epiphytes, climbers, airways, they love to find things like this and adhere themselves to the plant. A little harder to go north, like they would in the wild. So, you just want to find where you're going to put it, where it makes sense. So you find like kind of the top heavy part of the plant, or the longest trailing one, and you set it behind it. Put it down. It is too good. Yeah. Plant this size, maybe we don't need something this big. So I have toothpicks and skewers at home that I use sometimes, but it'll just help get the plant stability. Once it starts maturing a little bit more, you can kind of go into a bigger pot and get something like this. Like this would obviously need, if it started getting really top heavy, we have kind of tolerance of how to keep it steady. Because these are crazy. They grow crazy. They're hard to transplant. I like to use this. It's stretchy. It's not like twine that will cut into your plant, but so it'll grow with your plant. It's really good for big, kind of big ones like that. It works just as well for little ones. So this, in theory, would be okay to stay like that, but if I really wanted to kind of make sure it was in there, those are perfect plant to try it on.
And what is that called?
It's like it's a plant tape. It's not sticky though tape. Called wrap clip. It's like a vinyl stretchy material. It's just the ties, like a shoelace behind it. But it's giving. It bends with the plant as the plant grows. So twine, if you have it cut too tight, it's going to cut into the plant and hurt. Any last questions? Good. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully you learned a little something. Somewhat redundant going through the motions, but that's a good thing. It means it's kind of easy, or easier maybe than you thought.
Thank you. Very helpful.